live again for another episode. Sorry I'm a few minutes late here, just dealing with a couple things. Be a short episode today just because I'm dealing with some challenges. Um, yeah, joint venture partnerships. They're a pain in the ass sometimes. I've had some really good joint venture partnerships. I've had some really bad joint venture partnerships. When things go bad, they can be very bad. So that is my sharing tip for this week is when you're going into business with someone, make sure you have an escape clause. Make sure you have a shotgun clause. You can find a way that you can amicably split if you guys have differences of opinion. And typically how a shotgun clause works is the person with the money can end it at any time. And the person with no money has to just take the other's buyout. The way it works is you agree on a price. If you put the price out and the other person has a choice to buy that. So if property's worth 100 grand and you put out an offer for 50, that person can turn around and buy it at 50 because you put the offer out at 50. That's how a shotgun clause works. So you'd always put it at the highest, fairest market value, whatever you're willing to actually sell the property for. So if you think the property's worth 100, you'd offer them 100 for it. And they can choose to buy it for 100 or you buy it for 100 if they decline. That's called a shotgun clause. Super important, just because in business and in life, you'll run into people who you just aren't compatible with. You know, there'd be someone who's going through something mentally. Something's wrong with them in the head. I've dealt with that too, where people have mental illness or something wrong with them, and they'll just be bitter and try to destroy the relationship or waste your time. You have those kind of people who just want to waste time. And a good rule of thumb I've found that works the best is when you're going to a partnership, make sure you partner with someone who has something to lose. They have to have things to lose. If they have nothing to lose, you don't want to partner with them. Desperate people make bad decisions. So don't partner with people who are desperate. Don't partner with that contractor who has nothing to bring except for their labor. Because when they don't fulfill on that contract and they don't bring their labor that they promised to bring, you're going to have a problem. Or when things hit the fan, if they have no, like when you 50-50 joint venture partner with someone, if they don't have the means to cover their half of the loss, what happens? You as the JV partner have to cover 100% of the loss. I'm going through that right now, where I have to cover 100% of a loss in a JV. And it's going to be probably a $250,000 loss all said and done. No matter what we did, the market has fallen, whatever, the things happen. It's one time ever I partner with family, and it's one of those things you shouldn't do. It's one of those situations where if the other person doesn't have the means to come up, I've had some good partnerships with family too over time, but they say don't do business with family. They say don't do business with friends because you can toxify things, right? And so that's something to think about today. I wanted to share that with people. I know a lot of people message me and they're like, hey, should I partner up with, my brother on this, or should I? Although my brother and I have a great JV partnership. It's super rock solid, and not the case that I'm talking about in this case. I actually have a good partnership with my brother and it works out really, really well. But I hear lots of horror stories about people partnering, and I've had some horror stories myself partnering with JV partners. And so it's, all in all, a JV partnership can make a lot of sense to help you scale, but it comes with a lot of pain. And so that's what I wanted to share. That was the nugget I had for today's episode. I was thinking today about what do I share with you guys that's most impactful, that can have the most, value. And I think that's a big piece is just be careful when you partner with someone, make sure that they have the means to cover the loss. So if you're going out on a project, it's $1 million project, and it has the potential to make 20% or lose 20%, could happen. Anything can happen. If you take $1 million project and you lose 20%, it's a $200,000 loss. If the other person can't cover the loss, then you as the partner have to cover 100% of the loss to get out of the deal to stop further losses. Because remember, in real estate, if you don't have positive cash flow and you go to sell, especially in a down market, there can be losses. It can happen. So it's important. I think everyone should structure their partnerships at the outset. You need to structure everything before things get bad. Once things get bad, communication deteriorates. It's brutal. So anyway, that's my sharing thought for today. And yeah. Hello from Alberta. How you doing, David? Tristan says, need to get out of BC. No real estate opportunities here. I mean, I'm sure there is if you went more rural. I'm sure that there are places you could buy properties for $200,000-$300,000 or Airbnb them or make them work in more rural areas. Not in Vancouver, but if you went further out to islands or other places, I think probably some opportunities still in BC, but probably not anywhere in the Vancouver greater area. So in terms of finding deals, you don't necessarily need to leave where you live, but it helps to live near your property. Like trying to run a property remotely can be very difficult. It's asking for failure in a lot of cases, unless you have a big portfolio and a big team. So if you have just one-off property that's far away, the property manager is not going to care about your property. They're going to nail you in property management fees. There's going to be a whole bunch of stuff like that where if you don't have if you have your own property manager in-house and you have a huge portfolio and you don't live there and it's in another country or another province, you can run your business remotely with good systems. There's no doubt about it. But if you're doing a small business where you've got like a couple properties, it's really hard to run that remotely. You will not get priority quality care for your property in terms of maintenance, in terms of management. You need that scale and you need that size. Is buy and hold multifamily worth it in Ontario with all the rent controls? I guess, Randy, to kind of parse it in two pieces to answer your question. Piece number one is if you buy any rental property or build any property 2018 or newer, so it's built after 2018, there is no rent control at all. You can go to the tenant when their lease is done and say, hey, your rent's gone from $2,200 to $2,900, from $2,200 to $5,000, from $5,000 to $10,000. There was a case in a condo, I think it was rented for $2,000 a month in Toronto, and it was a newer built, and they just upped the rent to $4,000, from $2,000 to $4,000. And that's legal. You can do that when the lease is up. There is no rent control in Ontario on newer built stuff. So the first part of your question is kind of, the answer is it depends. So the older stuff does have rent control, in which case you have to work with the tenant to find a new place to live to get the rents up. You've got to renovate or reno, evict, or cash for keys, meaning I used to be king of cash for keys. There was a long time ago where in London I was known as the guy who did that. I did a lot of those units where I'd pay people to leave. They would leave willingly. They would sign to leave. They would sign an N9 and an N11. They would agree to leave, and all was good. They were happy. They got a couple grand cash, moved on to a new place. They're often in places that were in disrepair so badly that they were happy to go. Like I'd buy properties that had like, rodent issues or, pests, or there was a, flooding or damage, or the place was nasty. And so in most cases, people don't want to live in that. And if you give them a chance to leave somewhere else and you pay their first and last month's rent somewhere else, in most cases they'll just leave. So you can work with things. There are ways. It's a business. You can build the business up, and it can be profitable. It depends. Everything depends, right? It's all situational. Yeah. How do you make it work knowing tenants are never paying market rents? Well, initially they are paying market rent, and what you can do is actually sign a lease at a higher than market rent when you first rent the unit out. So here's a pro tip for that second part of that question. Let's say market rent is $1,500 a month. You could get the tenant, meet with the tenant and say, hey, I'm gonna rent this furnished. I'm gonna, whatever, I want you to take care of the grass, a cleaning fee, and I'll discount your rent. If you pay on time every month, I'll give you a prompt payment discount of say 2% of the rent. That's lawful, you're allowed to do that. You can't charge late fees, but you can give an incentive for them to pay on time. You can't charge them there's certain things you can do. So that's an example of one. But you can bring the rent up to say, if it's gonna be $1,500, you charge them $2,000, and you give them a whole bunch of discounts for various things that they do for you, including paying rent on time. And so their lawful rent is $2,000, but they're really paying $1,500. And maybe you give them a gift card or whatever. You explain to them, this is how you set up your structure. If they consent and agree to that, their base rent is $2,000. That's what you've agreed to. So now you can increase that by 3% every year on the $2,000. So in year 2, it's $2,060. And so it actually keeps up because your lawful rent is higher than the actual net rent that they're paying. So you get them discounts. That's a good way to do it. Set up gift cards. That's a way that I do a lot of my stuff so that you can keep up with inflation. And also you end up with a bad tenant who doesn't pay. Well, now you can add on all those extra additional costs to that. And that's fair. I mean, at the outset, any tenant who wouldn't sign that is probably someone who's planning to not pay, right? Like, why wouldn't, like, if you told me, hey, there's a prompt payment discount of $50 a month, I'm like, awesome, I say $50. And they're like, yeah, but you're like, this is the rent. You're like, okay, the rent's a little high for this apartment. Feels a little higher than market, but market is a ambiguous moving target, hard to determine what is market rent, right? So maybe you do a little bit high, but you offer them discounts. Like, okay, my net I'm actually paying is lower. The only person who wouldn't factor that in is someone who's actually not going to pay on time. They would be like, oh shit, like my rent's actually much higher if I don't pay on time. That paying tenant would be deterred anyway, which is what you want. You don't want that kind of tenant. So it'll scare away the bad tenants, so to speak, the ones who won't uphold their end of the bargain. And so that's something that I like to use to protect yourself, because there aren't a lot of protections unless you own newer built construction units. Eric, how you doing? Tough government policies. Yeah, there is definitely tough government policies in Ontario, but there are ways to maneuver and to work within that business. There's tough government policies everywhere, to be honest. Like even Florida, the super friendly, awesome state, took us a year to evict someone. Almost a year from start to finish. They appealed it. They went to court. Maybe not a year. It was like 7 months. But whatever. Like the same kind of shit in Ontario, in Florida. You get similar type stuff going on where people can delay for a while. And cash for keys makes sense because the court process is so slow. So even in Florida, cash for keys can make sense. We've done some cash for keys there. Any thoughts on Nike or Air Canada stock? I honestly don't follow them. I know that, oh, what I forgot to share today is Yeah, I didn't share that the NASDAQ fell 3.8% today, the biggest single day crash in years, followed only by the last one that happened on July, I think 17th. We had an almost 3% crash. So the NASDAQ from its tippy top peak, I was talking about a couple weeks ago, saying that I think it's be very careful, hedge your positions. I was clear about that on the stream. I think 3 streams ago, I was like adamant about it. I went on and said, if you have any tech stocks right now, please hedge them. The NASDAQ's fallen 9%. 9% in a couple of weeks, in 2 weeks, from 506 on the QQQ, 506.50 down to now like in the low 460s. That's a full 10% drop. Stocks like Tesla down 15%, Nvidia down, Apple down, Microsoft down, everything down, just full red across the board because it's been so overextended upward for so long. This is like basic. And so many of you guys are messaging on Instagram be like, oh, to the moon, it's going to keep going. The hype eventually ends. It can only be 65, 70p ratio on a tech stock for so long until things come home to roost and reality sets in that you're overpaying for what hasn't happened yet. And I think there's still more downside to go. However, I think there'll be a bounce. It won't be just straight down. There'll be days where it bounces back up. Those would be better short entries. I don't think today was a good entry point. The end of today, I don't think after sliding 10%, I think we should need to bounce a little bit before you're going to enter. But if you have longs right now, wait, for a little bit more upward bounce and protect yourself. Buy some hedges on the stocks that you have that are tech exposed. There is further downside risk there. Don't obviously close your position out, but just buy some insurance on it. If you, buy a put or sell calls, I like selling covered calls in my positions. It's a great way to protect against downside. You like the stock? Hold the stock, buy the stock, but sell some covered call insurance on it. A covered call at a price you're willing to let the shares go for. And if it doesn't reach that target, that's okay. You get money for nothing. Hope all is well. What do you think about turnkey properties and properties for good cash flow with labor and material costs? Any property can make sense. I bought turnkey properties where I've been able to add some value and it's made sense for me. In general, I like to buy stuff that needs work. I like to get that lift and I like that protection. When you buy turnkey, you don't really have the same levels of protection. So that's something to look out for. Any thoughts on the impact of the recent rate cut? Oh, that happened today too. I forgot to mention that. Bank of Canada cut rates again today. We have now had 2 rate cuts back to back, which is great here in Canada. It's going to stimulate the economy. But the problem is, if you look at the data, bankruptcies tend to rise the most after the rate cuts begin for the first 6 to 12 months. So we're not going to see that rip in prices quite yet. I think probably 2025, we'll start to really see prices start to inch up a bit. For now, I think things are actually headed flat. I don't think they're going to be going up. The reason they're cutting is because everything is destroyed. Like the economy in Canada is not well. People are renewing mortgages and they're literally our food banks have lineups like down the street and around the block. People are struggling and suffering. And that's why they cut rates, not because we beat inflation. Although we've made some progress on that, we still have a long ways to go, I think. Structural shelter inflation is out of control. And it's tough to really anchor that. I mean, another challenge is that higher rates actually do make shelter inflation worse. Landlords pass on costs with mortgages being higher. Obviously, that adds to housing costs. So there are, challenges I think that Canada is facing, and so it is good though, and I'm very happy. I'm continuing to buy assets, continuing to lock up quality deals, continuing to raise capital and partner with people. But again, being very careful about how we partner. Really important because a lot of people just starting out don't understand how to GB partner. They partner with family or friends and they just trust with a handshake agreement. I've done a lot of that too. And it has served me well in a lot of deals too. Saved a lot of, headaches and fighting. But at the same time, sometimes those handshake agreements can be major problems, right? In terms of that's just how it works. When you go through these situations where things don't go the way that you want, and you really wish you would have had a shotgun clause, or you can find some way to mediate. Any thoughts on the impact of the recent rate cut? That was the last question. So the next one is, hey, Mike, love the videos. Currently burning my house and plan on making my basement a 3-bedroom. However, there is room to squeeze a 4th bedroom. Would this be worth it? Yeah, probably. I mean, if you're going to house hack, getting more bedrooms or making additional units helps you to cover your cost. I think in general, going from a 3 to a 4-bedroom home makes it more desirable and marketable to both an investor and a home buyer. So I typically don't see any problem with that. If you have like a 7-bedroom house and you're like, should I go to 8 bedrooms? That extra bedroom probably doesn't add a lot of value except for maybe to an investor. But a family probably doesn't value anything more than 5 bedrooms. So if you go from 5 to 6, it may not necessarily add any real value. So it just depends. It really just depends. Chung says he's long. Poor Chung. I feel bad for you, buddy. It's been a slaughter the last couple of weeks there in tech in terms of like GameStop, Tesla, just the NASDAQ in general. Tech has been way overextended. And so if your entry point, Chung, was recent, I feel for you. If you missed out on selling at the top, the recent top that we had, just hang in there. Like over the long term, stocks tend to go up. Even ones that are way overvalued, at some point in the next 10 years, if you don't value your capital or the time value of your capital, it'll eventually come back, right? Unless you have carry costs. Like if you have a mortgage against those stocks, like you can set mortgages against stocks. If you have debt or carry costs on those stocks, then you can't afford to hold forever. But if you own the stocks in cash outright, you can hold and get a very low return over a many years period and always win. So that's something that's like the time value of money conversation you have to have with yourself to decide, what is my money worth? And could it be deployed elsewhere to make more? And I think in your case, probably could be deployed elsewhere to make more. I might just quit my job, started as a realtor and made a corporation. Can you talk about a path forward for getting long-term mortgages? I'm thinking about flipping while the corporate matures. Congratulations, by the way. That's awesome that you quit your job. You're finally, to one degree of financial freedom. I guess being a realtor is like a job. So in some ways it's more freeing. In other ways, you might be working on a weekend, which is less freeing. So it really just depends on how you characterize it. But congratulations. I think that's awesome. Being chained to a desk is, I think, worse than being free, working for yourself. At least when you work for yourself, you can call your own hours. So it's better for sure. Okay, can you talk about path going forward? So the question about the mortgages, it's going to be a challenge. Like probably for a good 60 days after you quit your job, you could probably pull off a mortgage right now with because they only want statements like 30 days or 60 days old for pay stubs. And so you may be able to still get a property right now really quick on something. And then, obviously after that, you're going to go private. So private loans, B lenders, alternative lenders, until you get that corp maturing to 2 years financials of showing your earning income through those financials. So yeah, there's obviously challenges with, I got a way around it for you. I just thought of it. You could just go into larger projects. So you go into 6plex or larger, and now the project has to be basically the thing that qualifies. So if you buy a nice 8plex or 10plex building, or even 6plex, you get commercial financing on it, and you don't need personal income. So it doesn't matter if you work, it just matters about your experience as an investor. So if you've been a landlord for a while, had a couple of rental properties, and you quit your job, and now you want to buy more properties, start buying commercial, using commercial mortgages. If you're going to flip, I would say go get alternative lenders and be quick and be good. You lose money if you buy properties that you can't hold for the long term with private debt. So if you're going to flip fast. Like you got to be in and out of that project in 90 days to 120 days. If you take too long, you will lose money. Even if you use bank financing, but just in general with flipping, you want to be quick. So the speed is super, super important on the flip. That'd be my advice for you. That's where most people fail, is they take too long. So be very quick, price smart. Do not get greedy with your pricing. Price very competitively. Bring in 3 realtors in the area, have each of them, ask each of them, what are the comparables? Where do you think I should price this at? And do the consensus, and probably even go a little bit lower. You can never I've never seen a property properly underpriced. I think in a desirable property that's nicely flipped, if you underprice it, you get multiple offers. If you're on the market properly, underpriced, in most cases, you'll sell. There's exceptions of like bad marketing and whatnot, and properties like in cottage country that are not getting a lot of views. But in a major city, depending where you flip, if you're flipping in a major city where there's a lot of eyeballs, a lot of investors, and you price low, you get multiple offers. Like you could just price it at $1 and people will go crazy for it. And you probably get it bid up to more than what you'd get if you just priced it high and waited for someone to negotiate, because the carry cost is so large. That's been my experience with flips. And I've lost on flips in this last little bit as well. I've made money, lots of money on flips over time. So overall, all in all, that's my wisdom for you. I'm gonna keep tonight's stream short. We got through all the questions. It's the first time I've gotten through questions this fast, which is pretty sweet. So thank you everyone for tuning in. I really appreciate all of you guys putting in the questions, and hang in there, guys. People are hanging in there. Rates are starting to fall in Canada. It's getting better. I think we have another year of pain, and then it's gonna just be a face rip up. But it's going to be time. I think there's going to be a lot more pain. And so if you're currently holding, hopefully you can, find a way to cash flow the property. If you can't, I would just sell it off. Like if you have a property that doesn't cash flow at all, like some of the stuff in Toronto, some of the cottages, it just makes sense to dump them. With the rates falling, you might get a chance to get out before things get worse, because winter is not a good time to sell a seasonal property. Winter is not a great time to sell property in general, even in Toronto, wherever. Properties sell better in the summer and in the spring. So something to think about. I mean, every property is going to be different. It depends what you can do with that capital. Can you take that and do more with it? Will there be a further carry cost loss in the future? You have to run the math, and the math will tell you the answer of what to do. So get in your spreadsheets, guys, and crunch those numbers and find out what the best path is forward. At the end of the day, there are 3 levers to control your financial future. You need to spend less. You need to find ways to earn more money, which means working hard, side hustles, all that kind of stuff. And then you need to maximize returns on the difference. So those are the 3 things you gotta do. That's the equation to building wealth. Spend less, earn more, and maximize returns on the difference, guys. That's it. That's how you unlock a wealthier you. Yeah. Someone said, should I buy now or wait for a little bit? I think if you can find a good deal, you should buy now. There's great opportunity out there. It may get worse into this fall, winter, but rates are falling. So buyers will start to jump in as rates fall. When we get back to the 4% interest rates, 5% interest rates, we're going to start seeing a ton of people re-enter with capital on the sidelines. The rich have never been richer. Just remember that. Investors still have a lot of capital. So my thought is continue to look. And if you find the right thing, jump on it. But make sure as a first-time home buyer, you can rent out the basement or house hack it in some way to cover your carry cost. I think you won't go wrong buying now. You'll look back. I think we'll look back in 2028, which is 4 years from now. We'll look back 4 years and say, why didn't I buy more? Why didn't I buy more? London real estate's down 25%. Why didn't I buy more at cash flowing real estate? And I'm going to put that caveat because you shouldn't be buying. There's a lot of properties you shouldn't buy. There's a lot of, probably half the properties in London make no sense. If you gave me all the properties in London, just gave them to me, I would sell it probably 80% of them right away. Even though I believe in holding real estate long term, I believe in holding cash flow positive real estate. I don't want to hold garbage that's going to lose money every month. You want to buy stuff that you can cash flow. If you can't cash flow it, dispose of it and buy something else that can cash flow. There's always another deal. All right, everyone. Have a good Wednesday. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I appreciate y'all. And thank you for the super chat. It means a lot. It's been a while since I got a super chat, so thank you so much. It obviously means a lot that people still support this channel. And yeah, we'll see you guys next Wednesday. And of course, on social media at Rosehart. Bye-bye.